Hello there, this is Terry, and welcome to the 25th episode of the Animation Industry Podcast. Today I'm chatting with David Braun, who is the creative director at Open the Portal Studio, which is an animation studio specializing in stop motion. And some of their recent work has included TV spots for Rick and Morty, and they've also produced a whole bunch of projects for Disney, Katy Perry, Mattel, eBay, and so many others. But what's interesting is that after 5 years of creating professional work for outside clients, the studio is completely shifting focus this year to work on their own original concepts. And they've got this pitch for this animated anthology that they showed me, and it's absolutely phenomenal, and I can't wait to see it get made. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And as we speak in this podcast, they are pitching it around to studios and streaming services. So a little bit more about David. He started animating with his family's home movie camera when he was just about 9 years old, and that's when he discovered stop motion. And I feel like that story is pretty relatable to everybody that I've talked to in stop motion, myself included. And David actually had a turning point after high school because instead of pursuing animation, he started pursuing a career in music with his band, Great Glass Elevator, who ended up getting signed to Atlantic Records. But through the process of making their own original animated stop motion music videos, he decided that animation was going to be his career path instead of music. So David attended the experimental animation program at Cal Arts from 2009 to 2013. And then he went on to study for a year at FAMU in Prague, where he won a contest through MTV as a student to interview Tim Burton, which helped inspire and kickstart his career. And since then, he's worked on a whole bunch of animated commercials and TV shows. So, David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Terry. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we have a lot to chat about because you've been in stop motion for a while. You have your own studio, but I want to start back when you graduated at Cal Arts and you immediately pitched a show idea to Frederator. Can you just start with that experience?
Yeah, so we had right away after graduating, we kind of just jumped in hot and really wanted to get an original idea out there, and we had stars in our eyes, and we thought like, oh, we're gonna totally just like sell an idea right away and jump into it. And we did get lucky enough to get a few pitches just right out of school. It started with the Nickelodeon Shorts program, which they do a program where they accept pitches for 1 to 2 minute content. And from there, we were able to pitch to them, and we got really excited. So we just started reaching out to people, and we got in contact with Frederator, and we did a pitch for Eric over at Frederator, and we were super nervous, but it ended up going really well. It's a very weird idea. We've pitched it to quite a few people now, and the reaction we almost always get is like, I love this. This sounds so great. I have no idea how I'm going to sell it. It's a very, to us, we like toned down the weirdness of the pitch. It's a show called Brain Fudge. To them, it seemed really weird still. So, but we pitched to Frederator, and Eric really loved the pitch, and he even told us like, you guys have a great vibe, you have a great pitch, you had a good chemistry and everything. And that show, it was like a mini series, kind of like an Over the Garden Wall format, that it was like telling this long story of the arc of a bunch of episodes. And he said, we love this, but we're really looking for this like one episode at a time content. And so if you guys ever have another idea in the future, I'd love to hear it again.
So what exactly is this pitch about, Brain Fudge? Like, can you share some of the details? Like, why is it so weird?
Yeah, so Brain Fudge it's set in a future far, far away from ours, where we first come into the world, and it's this sort of a Mad Max type of a place. It's this just really desolate it's actually, the people call it wasteland. It's like this super desolate world, and everything in the stop motion, like everything in this world would be very textured, all like natural textures and things. And you can tell that it's post apocalyptic. They're just scraping the bottom of the barrel to get through. And you meet this girl Z, who everybody in this wasteland is just pretty despondent, and they're all the whole society is pretty depressed, but they're just slugging through. And she's trying to change things, but nobody's really listening to her. And there's a second world that none of them are able to enter. It's just this sort of like, Thunderdome, barbed wire, sinister looking. If you the Rick and Morty episode when there's all the little Mortys getting tortured on the outside of that thing, It's the most sinister looking place. It's just this massive dome, and they know it's called Beautiful World for some reason. And these once a month, these ships come out and grab all, like, from the whoever's the newborn kids, all of the crops, all the, like, the resources, including the kids, are taken from Wasteland into Beautiful World. Not all of them. They're scanned, and for some reason, it's they're always looking for positive things. So people, like the happiest kids, are the ones that are taken, and so that's a big part of why everyone's very depressed and despondent there. But so Z is this main girl that we met, and where the show begins, she's kind of had enough. So we, like, established this relationship between Wasteland and Beautiful World, and Z decides she's going to do something about their situation. Oh, and also her little sister, who's very, very young, is one of the kids that gets taken into Beautiful World. Z never gets picked because she's no fun. She just doesn't even understand really how to have fun. And so the robots that pull the people in, they scan them. And so her sister was very fun. So she breaks in to this horrific, sinister place, and she follows the robot in and sneaks in, and is just dropped into what we could describe as, like, almost an infinite feeling Disney World. It's like actually this candy colored, beautiful paradise in there. And there's just everything kids could want. It's like Pleasure Island and Pinocchio, just on every steroid known to man. There's, like, crazy candy and rides and all kinds of stuff going on. And Z's trying to make heads or tails of this because she's never seen anything like this before. And what we end up finding out in the show, she notices all of the kids in Beautiful World have these sort of udders on their head, like cow udders. And at the end of every day, so the kids, like, are encouraged to have as much fun as possible. And then there's these, like, big sinister dudes called the milkmen that just look like giant 50s, like, smiling milkmen, but they only have, like, one kind of face smiling. And they gather all the kids at the end of the day, and then they, like, have milking machines that milk this substance in their brain called mind milk, which is what they produce when they have fun. And that's, like, the fuel that keeps this world going. So the show is about, she meets this kid Max, who's, like, the greatest mind milk producer in Beautiful World. But one of the other things at Beautiful World, once kids become teenagers and stop having fun, like, they become all cynical, they no one knows what happens to them, but they mysteriously disappear. So the kid Z meets is becoming a teenager, and he knows he's going to have to leave soon. And so the show is about the two of them banding together and trying to figure out what's going on in this world. And I think part of, like, the point that always in pitches got harped on, because we were originally pitching this as a show for kids, and we thought, like, oh, this is such a fun idea for kids. So Max, he's supposed to be producing this mind milk, and he's becoming a teenager, so he's, like, becoming less and less fun, and he's running out of it. So he's trying to get it from other kids in Beautiful World. So he makes these, like, shady deals to get their mind milk and say it's his so he can stay there. And there's an image in our pitch deck of this little kid, like, handing Max a vial of mind milk, and he's looking over his shoulder all sketchy. And it kind of looks like kids doing a drug deal. And in one specific pitch, the guy was like, is this drug dealing in a kid's show? We're like, no, yeah. So anyway, that was a way more detailed than necessary description of Brain Fudge. And we decided to shift it to pitch it as an adult show. But this was, like, we were just out of school and kind of trying to figure out, like, how to pitch a show and what it was all about. And that's actually an idea we're still very excited about and hope to create one day when we're able to have someone willing to take a pretty big risk on a show like that.
Well, yeah, I can tell you're still really passionate about it, and thanks for sharing that whole pitch. That was great.
Sure.
But so Over the Garden Wall, I wouldn't say is for kids either, and it's not for adults either, and it does have those really weird moments too in a similar sense. Do you think it has, like, your Brain Fudge, did you say it was
Brain
called?
Fudge, yeah.
Brain Fudge would have more like stickability now that Over the Garden Wall has come over? Because like, you started off being like Over the Garden Wall as an example.
That was a big comp we used, and we actually even met with one of the writers of Over the Garden Wall and showed him our idea. I think part of what, because that generally, like, in some studios were even like, we would really love to do this idea, but it's a big risk because of how weird it is. Over the Garden Wall, because it was an artist who had built some reputation from Adventure Time. It was the studio, I think, was a little bit more willing, like, okay, this is a something that happens a lot with animation for some reason, is like riding the line between, like, it's a little too scary for kids but a little too kiddie for adults. Where does it land? And they were willing to take that risk, I think, because they had this artist that had had already done some Adventure Time stuff. And that's where we're at right now, like with the pitches we're doing now, is like focusing on ideas that are a little bit more easy to get, like that we could do single episodes. And that was one thing that people responded to us a lot too, is it's like, it's a bigger commitment to do a whole huge arc versus like starting out with like standalone shorts and episodes. So that's what we're focusing on now. And I do think Over the Garden Wall is one of our biggest inspirations, and we just have nothing but respect for that show and the people who made it. And that's, if we could ever be like lumped in a category with them, it'd be a dream come true.
Yeah. So, well, I'm interested, like, what has kept your passion for this idea even after it got rejected so many years ago? What's kept your passion alive for it all this time?
I think a big part of it was that the nature of those meetings was, it wasn't a single time like, we don't think this is a very viable idea, or we don't really like it. It was always like, this is awesome. We just don't know how we can really sell it right now. And so, I mean, beyond that, we've just always, I can envision the whole world and series and character in my head, all the characters, and it's just, it would be one of the ultimate shows for me to make. I know it would be so much fun to watch, at least for me. And I think that's the best advice I've always gotten, is like, do what you're excited about. We have had other pitches that did not go over well, but this one, although it never got picked up, the pitch always went over very well. So that gave us a lot of encouragement that it was something worth revisiting in the future.
So, well, if this is like your ultimate show and you have had other pitches that haven't gone very well, and you are pitching other things, do you feel the same sort of excitement or passion for these other pitches? Because you also said that you're trying to create things more tailored to what a production company or a studio would want, I guess.
We're trying to work in a format that would work better. I wouldn't say, I don't think we really quite have the capability, ironically, that we don't really have the capability of making something tailored to what studios want. Brain Fudge actually was our attempt to do that, because the show we're pitching now was our first idea. And this is another, we're working with a management company now, and it's super helpful, because we realize, for me especially, there's a disconnect between what I think is like, oh, that's going to really go over well, or that's going to be too weird. The idea we're pitching now seemed too weird to us at the time. So we're like, when we had the opportunity to do the Nickelodeon shorts pitch, we're like, let's come up with something that's more like easy to get and more fun, and an easier sell for a studio. And that's when we came up with Brain Fudge. And it was like, this is cool, but this is so weird. And then when we made the deal with our management company, we brought them like a list of all our ideas, and they picked this one that we're pitching now, which initially we thought was too out there. And they were like, no, this is actually a really good pitch for right now. And it's worked out timing wise in an amazing way that there's a big return to classic animation right now. Warner Brothers just ordered 200 new Looney Tunes shorts. Disney's doing a big new push with Mickey again. So it's like, that character-driven short approach is around right now, so it's worked out really nice. And that was another reason they go, oh, this is a good format for you guys to pitch right now.
Gotcha. I do want to ask about the pitch that you're talking about, but I want to just backtrack a bit too, because you also said you have a couple failed pitches. But before that, even, how did you come out of school and just start contacting people that would be interested in a pitch from a fresh student? Like, how did you end up getting those contacts?
The very first one, the Nickelodeon one, it was an email that just went out to, I think they hit up a lot of animation students, and I was a student at CalArts at the time, and it just like Nickelodeon Shorts program. We're accepting pitches, and I think like the show The Loud House, they have a few shows that have, I think even Pickle and Peanut were developed from this program where students pitched a 2-minute short, Nickelodeon tried it out, and then they used that to decide if they wanted to make a show. So we developed the pitch. Brain Fudge was a pre-existing idea, but we turned it into a pitch for that. And once we had that, we just really reached out to as many contacts as we could find. I'm trying to remember. Oh, so we pitched Cartoon Network. I was literally at a CalArts end of the year screening. They do a big, like most schools, do a big end of the year screening to show all the work. And so I was at a student screening, and I ended up, my mentor and teacher, Stephen Kyoto, who is an incredible animator, human being. Look him up. He's the best. Chiodo, Kyoto. He just said like, oh, hey, here's this woman from Cartoon Network. We've done some work with them. And I started chatting with her, and I said, yeah, we just did this pitch for Nickelodeon Shorts program. She said, oh, well, why don't you come pitch it at Cartoon Network? And invited us to pitch it. So we took that one. And then the Frederator pitch, it was, I think we reached out to them through our friend. She was a classmate of mine. She was a master's student when I was at CalArts, but Kirsten Lepore, who did the Hey Stranger, the animation of the little butt guy, like looking.
Yeah.
And she had done like an amazing stop motion bumper for them that was like a guy with a jackhammer.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
And so basically like the foot in the door we got was Nickelodeon, and through that it was all connections and networking, and we just went through every contact we had and emailed, and we're like, let's just cold email as many people as we can. And we started to build relationships with those where it's like, even if people weren't interested in the pitch, they would say, oh, we can see you guys are doing cool work. We'd be interested to hear another pitch. And a lot of them we'll be circling back around to with Psycho Psalms that we're working on right now and pitching to them too. But it's one thing. And I did a lot of internships in college. I just recommend more than anything to students out there, like, don't stay insulated. Talk to your teachers, like meet people in the community. The relationships I made during school were really how I was able to pitch, and how a huge part of where we were able to find work for the studio too.
Nice. So what exactly are you, when you came out of school and you had a pitch, what physical assets did you create to pitch that?
For the first pitch, we did the very first one. It was just storyboards, just tons of drawings, and we pitched it with that. And then
storyboards, like you came out with an episode?
Yes, because the very first one was just for a 2-minute short, so I boarded it all out just really simply, and we basically built assets every step of the way. So at first it was just the drawings, then we decided to make a couple puppets, and so just during our spare time, we weren't doing jobs, we were working out of an apartment in Glendale at the time. It was before we got this studio space, and we called ourselves Open the Portal. We were working out of a 1-bedroom apartment, and I put together a couple puppets, and that's what that was basically all we had at the beginning. And then once we got this space and we decided we wanted to keep pitching Brain Fudge, we had put it on hold for a while, but we started working with a writer. And we found a great artist to do some story art for us. And then for our pitch, we had one of my favorite things. I'll go grab it really quick. It's right around the corner.
Sure.
So I've always been a big fan of briefcases. I love carrying them around. I love kind of like having, I don't know, just like job things is what I would call them. Maybe I feel like I have like an official job when I have a briefcase. So I always would carry them, and we had the idea, like, what if we put the pitch in the briefcase? And so I haven't opened this in a long time. This was the briefcase we took on the pitch, and it's already missing its handle and stuff, but we basically built this to take. So we would like slide it out on the table and be like, and here's the world
Ah.
that we're gonna show you in Brain Fudge. And so it's this
Oh
like
my gosh.
full pop-up little world inside of the briefcase.
Are
And
those giant lips in the middle?
yeah,
Oh
it's
wow.
when it's actually functioning for pitches, it lights up and makes sound also. So
What?
that was like we would bring it in and we'd have like set this briefcase, then we do the pitch, and then that was like either at the beginning or the end, depending on the pitch we were doing. We'd be like, and voila. And that was really fun, and it was really effective in the pitching process. So that was the final asset we made for Brain Fudge.
Okay, so storyboards, your personality, and briefcase.
And two puppets.
And two puppets, right. So you were living out of an apartment and you weren't working and you were just working on pitches right out of school? Like,
So we were doing everything we could to meet ends meet right out of school. We both, so at first, Micah, who is our exec producer, he went to Art Center, I went to Cal Arts, and we worked on our final project together, 4th year, and we decided to start Open the Portal with Barrett Slagle, who does all of our sound, and we immediately Micah was living in this apartment, and it was like he was with his wife. They had the bedroom, and then I slept in the living room, and it was a wood floor, which was great because we could use it as a stage. So when we got a job, we would flip my mattress up and we would like build a little set there in the room, like in the living room of the apartment, and we'd like duct tape cardboard boxes up over the windows and stuff. But so we were doing any little freelance jobs we could find. There's a few still on our website. My cousin owned a pizza restaurant called Pizza Guru in Santa Barbara. And he's like, hey, I'll give you guys a couple $1,000 to make an animated promo for us. We did a lot of spec work. And we were also working for a moving company. So like on the side, Micah and I were like doing freelance moving jobs, and just, he was doing some photography. We'd do wedding videos, whatever we could do to keep enough money to pay our bills so that we could keep doing the pitches and keep doing animation.
wow, that sounds really stressful. How did that experience feel? Just like this gear grinding, looking for pitches, getting freelance work, living in a very small, tight space.
It was very intense. And a lot of days, like we would just spend, we made these huge spreadsheets of like, here's all the studios we want to work with. Here's all the ad agencies we might be able to get a commercial with. Here's all this. And there were a lot of days that we just sat for hours, just sending cold emails to literally thousands of people. And it was a little claustrophobic, but I do have to say at the same time, it was really fun because we were just, I don't know, we were really just in it to win it. We were really excited about it, and we knew we had something we were very proud of. And it definitely felt like something we had to earn. And it was very stressful at times. It still is, it just in a different way. But yeah, it was very intense during the time that we were shooting and doing everything out of the apartment.
Wow. Well, you've also run your own studio for the last 5 years, and congratulations on that. But how has that changed? That reaching out to thousands of people and working in a small studio space. How has that changed over time for you?
Well, the thing that's changed, so at the beginning, like I think right now we're in a place where we've built a lot of great relationships. We've had a lot of great clients. We know a lot of people at studios and things like that. But being that we're still like an independent studio, there's a big curve between like independent creators and then a huge ad agency or like a huge media production company. And the struggles or the challenges we face right now are figuring out like where we fit in between those worlds. It's like we're too big to be just like a little freelance studio, but we're too small to be a giant media production studio. So it's just figuring out, we've expanded pretty big compared to what we were in before. This is a a giant Quonset hut, like an old airplane hangar, basically, that's been built out with stages and offices, and it's hard to strike the balance of like we've had jobs, and I think if we ever get a show, we don't have enough space here to shoot that, but when we're not doing a job, we don't need even the amount of space we have. So it's like it's a little bit of a struggle just figuring out what the balance is. And that was a big part of our. I know we'll get to that a little bit later, but that was a big part of our decision to really focus on developing creative projects and not. At first, we were trying more like we're going to be a big commercial production house and use that to fund our projects. But now it's like, no, we really want to focus on that development part.
Okay, well, yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. So let's just backtrack back to those pitches. So the second pitch you said it was kind of a failure. What was that one all about?
So I can't remember how exactly it came about, but we had the opportunity to pitch to Frederator again. We had already pitched some Brain Fudge, and we had pitched Brain Fudge out a little bit, and I think they just said, hey, we're looking for pitches again. And so because our Brain Fudge pitch had gone so well with them, and they had said, you know, that like this was such a great pitch, you guys have good charisma, it's really exciting, we kind of got like, oh yeah, we got this, like we'll come up with a new idea. And they were saying we're doing pitches in about 2 weeks, and we're like, oh, we can come up with something for sure. So we booked a pitch without having an idea developed yet, and then we just spent those. We were in a space where like we had made enough from the moving company that we didn't have to work for a couple weeks. So we're like, let's just go all in, and we came up with this idea called the Portal in Bob's Garage. Bob is a character who exists here at Open the Portal. He's a real human being. And we've worked with him in some capacity for like 15 years. He's an old friend, a mentor. He used to be the producer for our band, and he's indescribably unique. This guy, I couldn't do him any justice. We might have a podcast one day and have him on it just so he can speak for himself. He's like Chuck Norris. There's all these like Chuck Norris jokes and the most interesting man in the world, the Dos Equis guy. Bob's like both of those, but it's real. Like his stories are just unbelievable. So anyway, we came up with this whole pitch where because Bob's Garage was where I met Micah way before we were both in school. I would do I was roommates with Bob when he was producing the band. I rented a room at his place, and the garage, they didn't use it, so I would make animation in there. And so we came up with this idea that was like set in that time. And Bob's Garage actually had a portal in it, and Bob was like this mystical, like sci-fi wizard sage guy that would like, it was like kind of like Home Improvement. They go to Wilson like, oh, I've got this problem, and he gives them advice, but Bob would give us advice by like taking us into this magical realm through the portal in his garage. And Bob's like an old hippie, like he's kind of a hair metal hippie. He's like a hippie, but he was into like crazy hair metal, and he was in all these hair metal bands. So we kind of had that idea, and we brought it to Frederator, and we were just like, we were pretty pumped up. We're like, this is such a winning idea. They're gonna love this. And we came in, and he even said like, oh, he's like, I've got this new intern. Hey, come in here. These guys did a great pitch last time, so I want you to take notes and just kind of see what the pitching process looks like. So he pumped us up to her too. And so we're just like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Here we go. So we launch into the pitch, and like all the moments in a pitch, you want to construct it like a comedy routine. You have moments where people laugh and gasp, and every moment where we were expecting an emotional response, it was just kind of like, huh, and like all these points that we thought, oh, this is going to be such a great joke, nothing landed. And it started getting like, the awkwardness was palpable in the room. Like everybody was like, it was like being at a bad comedy show, but we were the comedians. And the intern kept looking at him, and he was looking back. And so we got through it, but by the end, like we were just like, oh man, this is like, and so, but we tried to kind of keep up like, yeah, so what do you think? And he's like, yeah, well, I can tell it needs a lot of development. And he was trying to kind of find some nice things to say. And I said like, well, we were going to do some more work on it. Why don't we'll develop it a little more and bring it back to you guys? And he just goes, why don't you see if anyone else in town wants to hear it? Like, basically right in front of it, just was like, no, I don't ever want to see this idea again. And in fairness to the situation, it was like very half-baked. I still think it's a really fun idea, but I think we were way too big for our britches, and that we had really prepared for Brain Fudge, and this one I think our egos took the wheel, and we learned a valuable lesson from that pitching disaster. And right after we got out of the pitch, we were like, we need to go to Cold Stone, and we went to Cold Stone and got just huge ice creams because we felt like we just got our asses handed to us.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so old eccentric guy who lives in a garage and has a portal to another world. Kind of sounds like Rick and Morty to me a little bit.
Yeah, that's actually crazy.
So
I haven't thought about that.
So why do you think this pitch went so poorly? Like, if you believed in the idea, you had the confidence, what was it that really fell short that you would go back and change?
I think just mostly preparing would be the first thing. And just never, I remember reading an interview with Steven Spielberg when he made 1941, and I think it was his first film after Jaws, but he just basically, he felt like he didn't need, here's the answer, getting good feedback and really listening to people's critiques and taking them to heart. I remember reading this article, and Steven Spielberg said, like, after Jaws, he felt like he was invincible, he could do anything, everyone was going to love anything he put out, and 1941 was really poorly received, and he said a lot of it was he didn't take feedback, he didn't listen to critique, he felt like, no, I'm Steven Spielberg, like, I know what I'm doing. And for us, that was on the smallest scale ever, but we felt like because we had like a good experience with this other pitch, we didn't, with the Brain Fudge pitch, we were filming ourselves every day, sending it to our friends, asking for a critique, anyone who would watch it. We'd bring in our parents and our relatives and friends, and we practiced and we like took notes. And with this one, we didn't do anything. We just jumped in blind. And
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because, like, in my mind, a pitch is like you show up and you have your presentation and you just go for it. But you're saying like you filmed yourself and practiced, and maybe you didn't realize how much it changed over time, the actual pitch, because the second time around you just had that confidence being like, we're going to do great. But
yeah,
if you were to redo that pitch, the Rick and Morty parallel show, you would film yourself, get critique. Like, you think the idea is still there. It's just the execution that really fell flat.
yes. And I think, yeah, and just there's so much value in, especially if you're making a show or any kind of art or music or anything, it's like it's a conversation. It's not just you, but it's like what you're saying and then also the people listening to it. And a lot of times it might make total sense in your own head, and then you explain it to somebody and they go, oh yeah, it's all about this, and it's like, wait, no, it's not. I think it's just so valuable to get feedback and have it helps. It's like communicating in general. It's just if you totally dominate conversations and don't listen to what the other person's saying, it's going to be a one-sided thing. And I think it's very for especially making TV movies and things like that, just getting outside opinions, it really helps the idea to be like more fully formed.
So and when you said you'd be more prepared, is that the only thing that you would change?
I think given the nature of the situation, because the reason we developed it so fast is they said, hey, we're taking ideas in 2 weeks. I think in the future, if I didn't have an idea that I felt like, oh, this is something I'm really ready with, it was a little bit, and I don't regret doing it because it was a little of a challenge to ourselves. Like, can we come up with something this fast and make it good? And I think the answer was we could come up with a good idea, make it good, maybe not so much. So I think maybe if I had to do it again, I would have said like, hey, thanks for inviting us to pitch. We don't have anything ready at the moment, but we'd love to schedule something on your next round, and then actually taking the time to develop it properly.
Cool. So you're working on your next big pitch right now, and you have like a lot of experience pitching because you have 5 years of like commercial client work. You have these other two pitches under your belt. You said you hired a management company this time. So can you what is this next pitch? Can you give the gist of it? I don't know if you can share the whole thing yet, but can you
Yeah, I
explain
can.
a little bit?
Gist of it. So we have these characters that have been with the studio since the beginning, since way before even. The Time Crow is our main guy, and actually this is the very first. This is not him. This is the Clock Man. This is like his ancestor. But this was a T-shirt for our band back in the day, and it just became our unofficial. I'll figure it out later. He became our unofficial mascot, and we love this character. We love the idea of this kind of human embodiment of time, like a kind of weird spirit character that represents time. And so we always wanted to do a project featuring him. He's called the Time Crow. So it's like the idea a scarecrow scares birds away from crops that a farmer's trying to hide. The Time Crow is like, he's scared. It's the concept of time that scares people, like, oh, should I do that? Should I take this risk? Should I try that? Will I have enough time? But then you realize it's somewhat of an illusion, and it can be Time Crow can be your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on how you treat him. So this pitch, we came up with this idea. We're huge fans of that 7-minute animation format, the old like Looney Tunes shorts, the Fleischer Brothers stuff, the Mickey stuff. And something that resonated so much about those characters is it was always in a time where we were going through something difficult in the world, like the Great Depression or World War II. And Mickey and Bugs and these guys they were always these underdogs that, like, Bugs was just trying to live his life in his rabbit hole and eat carrots, and then, you know, Wile E. Coyote or Elmer Fudd or whoever would come along with a shotgun and just, you know, mess with this whole thing. And so through watching these underdogs triumph, it was like a kind of cathartic release. And I think that was I read a book about Disney at one point, about Mickey specifically, and it was talking about how these characters would resonate with those times. And we were realizing there's a general sensation that things are hard right now in the world. Like, it's a weird time to be alive. There's a lot of tension, a lot of weird stuff going on. And a lot of it is mental health, is like not the Great Depression, but actual depression. And we're facing a lot of really weird, hard to face things. And a lot of the cartoon characters, stuff that we really love, even, it has this really bleak feeling, which I think is reflecting something a lot of us are going through. And we were like, we need a Bugs or a Mickey or somebody that can be like the champion for the underdogs in our time. And so we've formulated this series called Psycho Psalms, which is, so Disney had Silly Symphonies, Warner Brothers had Merry Melodies. So it's very much like a parody / love letter to that format, where Time Crow, and we came up with this whole cast of characters that the idea is they all were existing around the same time as Mickey and Bugs and all of them in, like, say, you know, the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And they were it was like an unknown animation studio, and nobody really knows about these characters. And Psycho Psalms is a bunch of shorts that take place when the characters from that time get sucked into our world. So they're facing all kinds of stuff like fake news, conspiracy theories, the pharmaceutical industry, like all kinds of stuff that is creating polarizing conversations and confusing and making it hard to make sense of the world right now. And then they just, you know, stick a bunch of dynamite into it and blow it up. And so it's like a release that this is for the same way that, like, when people were dealing with hunger in the Great Depression, or like the crazy war with Hitler, and they'd watch these cartoons and have this kind of like empowering, healing feeling. That's what we want to do with Time Crow with our show.
And this is all stop motion, right?
Yes. That's another, we wanted it to have a feeling of like being right on the border of imaginary and real. And so we wanted to take those kind of cartoon tropes and put them in an actual physical, tangible world. And that was one of the biggest, most fun challenges of coming up with the look, was how are we going to, in stop motion, show what those old cartoons used to do in 2D?
Yeah, because they're like rubber hose all over the place, ridiculous stuff.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing. So what are you doing this time around with the pitch that you like? What is every? Can you just like list out everything you've prepared for this pitch? Like you want this to be a success. You're going forward with this. You hired a management company. Like what? Like just give me the laundry list of everything.
Sure. So I'll start with internally, like what we have and what we're bringing to the table. The most important piece, and that every time we've pitched, people have always said, if you can have this, this is going to just exponentially increase your chances of selling the show, is an animated teaser that actually gives a sense for what the show will feel like. We didn't have the time or resources to do that on our last pitches. And so we did a lot of sketches. It's not to say you can't sell a show with that. Plenty of amazing shows have sold with just even text. But the look was it's a very visual show. There's dialogue, but it's more about the visual gags. And so we put a lot of time and effort into really crafting this teaser that gives a representation of what the show will feel like. So that's the number one thing we bring in. And then one thing we had with the Brain Fudge pitch that we really refined over time was we made a really strong keynote presentation that goes along with the pitch that shows it flows like a story, and it provides excuse me, a little bit of context, like what is this show about, what's the reason, what's the why at the core of it. And then as it unfolds, we introduce characters and we introduce the look of it and some artwork and stuff. So we have a detailed presentation that goes along with a pitch that I basically I stand next to the screen and I go through the images. And so those are the two main assets. And then because we made this teaser, we built tons of puppets and we have a really beautiful set. For the pitch, we bring our two favorite puppets, and we bring them out at the end to say, like, hey, here, now you can see like these actual guys and how they look in the world. So on that's what we bring internally, and we're still, even though we're already pitching, we're still developing. One thing we don't have is a script. We had a script for our pilot for Brain Fudge, but for this one, because they're much more one-off shorts, we have beats for every short. And so we've been working more on that, and I do hope to have some more fleshed out scripts soon. That's something we're working on that we don't have at the moment.
Is that something that in the actual pitch itself they ask for? Is that kind of like a follow-up, like if you're interested and want to see more stuff, we actually have a couple scripts written?
That's a follow-up thing. When we did Brain Fudge, we never led with the script. It was a back pocket thing, and I'd say maybe half the pitches they asked, do you have a script we can look at? And so it's a nice thing to follow up with. But one of the main, a lot of time, if you have an actual, like we have this 3-minute piece that shows you what what the show will feel like. So the script is not as necessary. And we say with this pitch too, if you watch this teaser, right away if you're going to like it or not. Like, if you dig this, you're definitely going to be interested in it. If you don't like it, no amount of scripts is going to convince you to like it. It's like you get the absolute sense of like what this is going to feel like.
So can you walk me through the entire process of like cold outreaching a studio or something like that? Like from like emailing somebody to showing up at the pitch to pitching, like what does that entire process look like?
Sure. Well, so my favorite one, our favorite cold outreach was actually another massive fail. We pitched to, we were in Burbank, so I think it was Cartoon Network. We had done a pitch for Brain Fudge, and we were driving back, and we passed the Walt Disney Animation Building, and we were like, we have all the stuff ready for the pitch. Like, why don't we just go show up and see if we can pitch right now? So we literally drove into the gateway of the building, and like the guy comes out, he's like, hey, can I help you? I'm like, we're here to pitch an animated series. And he goes, oh, okay, who do you have a meeting with? And we're like, we don't have a meeting. We just have all the materials ready to go. And we just love to pitch to whoever will hear it. And the guy was just like, are you crazy? Like, that's not how it works. You can't just da 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 da. And it was pretty funny. Rather than just ask us to leave, he got pretty mad, which it was really funny and actually made the whole experience a lot better for us. And we were joking, like, what we need to do is get like outfits, like we're the cleaning guys, and then come in with like, or I'll dress like a cleaning guy, come in with a thing of linens, and you'll hide in there, and we'll have all the pitch stuff hidden in the cart. We never actually did that, of course, but that, I tell that story because there's almost no standard to finding people to pitch to. It really was like when we hadn't built that network yet, it was like whatever we can do to make the connections. But a lot of times, I would ask too, I'd say for anyone out there who's a student, ask your school for resources, because that once some of my teachers and mentors knew that I was trying to pitch, they kept their ear to the ground, and like when they heard like, oh, so and so's looking for a show, they would give us some info. But so the process, like the one at Cartoon Network, I met this woman at the CalArts showcase. She gave me her card, and we just talked about, I gave her one thing that's really important. I'm sure you all know the phrase, but is an elevator pitch, where you have like your basic, like in 2 sentences, you can get the gist of the idea across. And that's really important to have consistently in your head. Because when I met this woman, I said, oh yeah, she asked me, what's the show about? And so I gave her this 2-sentence description, and she said, that sounds really interesting, gave me the card. And so I basically went home, and right away, it's always finding the sweet spot. Like, you don't want to get on your phone and email them while you're in the bathroom 2 minutes later, because then it's like, okay, why are they so antsy? But you don't want to let a few days go by, and they forget about you. My general rule of thumb is usually the next day, 2 days max. But I usually wait 1 day and just say like, hey, it was awesome to meet you yesterday. I'm David. If you remember, we talked at the showcase, and I mentioned I have this show. I'd love to set up a time that I can talk to you about it. So I send that email to her, and then she responds a day or two later. And one thing I'd say as an encouragement to everyone, that a mistake I learned the hard way, if you don't get a response in the first day or two, don't worry. They're so busy. And I used to feel like, oh, I need to keep emailing and keep emailing. You should be persistent, but think of it almost as like when you're like dating someone, you're just starting to like each other, and you don't want to come on too strong, but you also don't want to not be around. There's no scientific answer, but I would say just don't ever take it personally if they're not getting back to you right away. It takes some time. And I think I probably blew some connections by being too antsy and just like, when can we set something up? And then they're so busy, and it's like, this person's going to send me a message every day. I don't have time for this. And just respect their time is what I'd say, but also be persistent. So we probably exchanged a few emails and then set up a time. And she's like, okay, here's the people that you'll talk to. And then, it's funny because I'm used to it now that I've done so many, but the first time, I would say if you have the chance, try to get a tour of a big studio before you pitch at one, because I hadn't really toured any big studios. And so I remember walking into like Cartoon Network, and it's just like, driving from my little apartment in Glendale, and then it's like just this huge, glorious palace of animation. And it feels so like intimidating and scary at first. And I think it's now, after that first time I go, and I kind of know what to expect, and I feel a lot more comfortable. But being comfortable in a pitch is so key, because in a lot of ways, beyond just the idea, you're selling this person on you and your ability to create. And if they pick up your pitch, they're going to work with you maybe for years. And so if you're really like anxious or nervous, or you come on too strong, it might be like, okay, I don't know if this, even if they like the idea, that could turn somebody off. I think it's so much nicer and comfortable. And I'd say this from the other end too, is like, now that I have a studio, and when I hire people, it's like, being able to work with people that you can just relax and be yourself with, people really appreciate that. So I always keep that in mind. And it's just like, be a little bit selfish, do what it takes to make you feel comfortable. Don't feel like you need to please them or do everything. It's just like, if you want a glass of water, say, hey, I'm going to grab a glass of water or whatever, just get in a good zone, and they'll appreciate that, because then that will put them at ease too. And I think that my most successful pitches have been when I wasn't trying to prove something or oversell it, but just feeling comfortable and being excited about the idea.
Awesome.
So anyway, I'm going into all kinds of tangents, but basically, to finish up the question, exchange a few emails, we set up a meeting, and actually the Cartoon Network one, because what you're really going for in your first pitch, usually you're dealing with somebody, they cast a very wide net where they're looking for, say if their goal is to find one show, they might connect with 20 different creators and like find 20 people and like, hey, come and tell us your idea. And then they'll be the first sort of line that you talk to at the studio. And if they like the idea, then they'll say, hey, I want to set up a meeting with my boss. And so then usually maybe they'll pick 5 out of those 20, and then you go with them to the next person up. And then that person might pick 2, and then you go to the top level and pitch and to the decision maker who picks a show. So with this Cartoon Network one, we actually, we got through to the second level. This lady that we pitched to loved the show and said, I'm very interested in Brain Fudge. I'm going to talk to my supervisor, and I'd love to schedule a second pitch. So if you've ever been and done like a high school play or something like that, it's very much like auditioning. So I remember we went back, and it was another one of those. We're like, when are they going to write to us? And trying to keep just enough contact. And they called us back, and we went and so we got another email, and then we went maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks later, and we met with her supervisor. And that pitch was the one that the guy said, like, this is a really cool idea, but I'm really looking for X, and this idea is Y. It doesn't fit the format we're looking for right now, but we'd love to hear another idea in the future.
Would you change anything in the pitch between those 2 contact points?
What do you mean, like about the content or how?
Yeah, would you look at the reactions and think, okay, this part didn't get such a good reaction, so I'm actually gonna, I don't know, add a new character or add some other element or something like that to make it a little better? Or would you play it safe and do the exact same pitch the second time?
Everybody's different. For me, we do that regardless. Like, we are meticulous at archiving information. Like, every pitch we do immediately after, even when we're practicing it. And right now, like with our pitch, every single day at 5 o'clock in the studio, we run through the pitch, and anyone who's in the studio, we invite them to listen to it and give us notes. And we are constantly refining it and making it better and better. And especially in a pitch, if like the one I told you that was a train wreck, there were all these jokes that we thought were going to hit and they didn't hit. And so we really keep note, like, if that joke didn't hit or this character is not being received well, we always maintain the integrity of the idea. Like, we don't want to change, the idea, but the way that the stuff's presented, if it's like, if I'm describing it this way and it's working really well, we might amp that up. And if there's something that we thought was funny but generally isn't getting a laugh, we might take that out or change the joke. As far as to the question of having it be different at the different levels, that's a good question. For me, it would be more just refining the pitch a little bit more. But I would say, with all this in mind, there's also no formula there's, like, in our current pitch, we have a bunch of jokes in it, and there's like one joke every time we say it in the pitch, the whole room laughs. We did one and nobody laughed, but they laughed at all these other jokes, but that one they didn't think was funny. And so it's also really good. I think it's a numbers game, and that's one reason we do it to as many people as possible, because not everybody thinks the same thing is funny. So we like to get more of a wide view. But it's important to be ready. Like, if anything technically goes wrong, if you forget your line or you forget what you're going to say, just be ready to always keep going, because the pitch poison is if you stop and you freeze and you don't know what to say or keep going. And like, that was something I had to break from early on when we'd have like our jokes constructed, and I'd usually pause for a laugh, and then we do one, and if people didn't laugh, I'd be a little bit deer in the headlights, like, oh, they didn't laugh. But so you just learn through refinement to not be ready for a laugh, but don't expect it. And if they don't laugh, you just right into the next thing. Don't even give them time to think about like, oh, I didn't think that was very funny. Like, and if they do laugh, then you can, and sometimes if they think something's really funny, you're also making mental notes for the Q&A after, because usually you do your presentation, and then if the longer they keep you, the better it is. So you'll do a big question and answer session, and if you made mental notes like, oh, they really thought that like the purple spaghetti joke was funny, like yeah, that purple spaghetti, like call that back when you're doing the Q&A, like think about the things that are appealing to them, because they're the one they're going to make the decision if they're going to invest in this or not. And so if you can show them that like you can make something that they're going to be excited about and feel confident about, that's just a huge win for you.
So what are some of the harder things that they ask you in that Q&A? Like what's a dreaded question I could ask you?
A big one is how much is this going to cost? A lot of times they'll say, what does an episode cost? How much does a minute cost? And the best thing to do your research based on what kind of animation you're going to do, find the answer and just say it directly. We used to get really like, I think because we came from a place of making these videos in our garage and we didn't have big budgets. And when we would work with clients, they didn't have big budgets. We would be really timid about like, well, we could really find ways to do this or that. They're just looking for a bottom line. Like, it's going to be $100 million a minute. Like, okay, cool. You know, and they're always excited to hear that number.
So how do you figure out that number?
For me, the way a lot of this stuff you can look online, like a lot of shows, you can find articles that will say how much they cost an episode. Like, for example, the Shivering Truth is a stop motion show on Adult Swim. And there's an article about it. They had $400,000 an episode. It's open knowledge. And like, I think The Simpsons at one point was like $1 million an episode. Right. For us, we figure out like we just do a rough estimate of like how many sets, how many puppets, what's a comparable show that has that amount of sets and puppets in it. And then we look for as many articles on that as we can, or try to find a few comparable shows.
I'm going to have to look at that article now, because The Shivering Truth is a ridiculous stop motion show everybody should go watch. But $400,000 is a lot of money. Wow.
Yeah. And that's on the less expensive side.
Yeah. But
pretty wild.
But I thought it would almost be more, because stop motion needs all these sets and everything. So surprising.
It is. It's like just a huge shout out here to the team at The Shivering Truth, Kat Solon, the director, Javen Ivey, one of our friends, who, if you get the chance, I'll connect you with Javen. You should get him on a podcast about just stop motion wizardry. Kludging is what I think we call it, when you just make something happen with no resources. He's a brilliant mad scientist genius guy. But I think he's a big part of it. Like, they did a phenomenal job at making that budget look like so much more. It's very impressive.
So what are some of the other business related questions they ask, other than the bottom and what's it going to cost? Like, who's managing it? Who's coming? Where are you hiring people? Who's this being outsourced to? Do they ask all those things in the
No,
pitch?
not so much. But I think one thing that they do, they if you don't include, they will ask our comps. Like, what is this show like? Because usually they're thinking about it from a business perspective. Like, I need to get a show that I want to get something I'm excited about, but I'm going to invest millions of dollars, or my company's going to, and you know, I'm on the line for this decision. I want to know, like, okay, you're making this, like, it's going to be a character drama, but with like really crazy cartoon characters, like BoJack Horseman. It's like, it's really colorful on the surface. It looks like this colorful, crazy Hanna-Barbera cartoon, but then it's this deep adult character drama. If you can point to those things, that really helps them paint a picture of whether they feel like they can find a home for this. And that was something earlier on. It's almost like if you're in a band and they're like, what band do you sound like? Every band wants to think, no band sounds like my band. I like the most, we're just our sound. But it's not an insulting question for them. It's like, if it's a record label, it's like, we know that people that like our label enjoy these kinds of music, so we want to know what could be comparable. And I used to shy away more from that question. When they'd ask, I felt almost like it's a trap, like, oh, are they asking what are we imitating? But it's so they can get a picture of where they can find a best home for your show. So that, I think, that used to be a dreaded question for me, and now we really think with that in mind first. So we really think through, what would our budgets be? What are similar shows? And also, if you can just talk a little bit about that, like, yeah, our show's a lot like Rick and Morty. And, Rick and Morty started as this like single show on Adult Swim, but now they just got renewed for 70 episodes. Like, if you can talk a little bit about, and their audiences love comic books. And like, we actually are super influenced by comic books. That's a big part about what we do. I think that's a super helpful thing to be prepared with, because if you don't have that in the pitch, you'll probably get asked about it.
Oh, I mean, well, thank you so much for sharing all this pitch stuff. I also am curious as to how you kind of ended up in this place. So maybe we can switch gears a little bit and talk more about Open the Portal as a studio. So out of school, you started pitching, and then you started picking up freelance work to pay the bills. And then that freelance work turned into a full-fledged studio for the next 5 years, right? So can you share that journey and experience too, and how you, because I know you built up all that commercial work, but now you're just scaling back to work on pitches. It's like you're coming full circle all over again.
Yeah. I think this basically, at the beginning, our goal was that we're going to be 50-50, because we really wanted to make our own ideas, but we weren't really interested in developing an idea just to sell. Like, okay, what are people buying right now? Let's make that. We really wanted to do stuff we were already passionate about. And so we figured the best way to do that is if we can self-fund projects. And, we'd still want to work with a studio, like pitch things, but if we can self-fund the initial thing, that could help us really get our foot in the door. So when we were still in the apartment, we would just, like I mentioned, our first projects were my cousin's pizza place. We reached out to an independent beer brewing company, coffee places, and we basically knocked on doors and said, hey, we have these skills, we want to make something, and we're willing to do it for, work with whatever budget you have at the moment. Like, we would mostly be doing Instagram content and stuff like that. Like, for this beer company, they're like, well, we want to do an Instagram video. We've got $3,000, which that kind of budget doesn't stretch very far with stop motion. But for us, it was like, it didn't, we were more just trying to build up our experience, because we couldn't go to bigger companies because we didn't have a resume. So once we got those under our belt and we had a few little things, we also did a few spec projects. Like, we reached out to some companies and said, hey, can we make something, and you decide if you want to use it or not. If you don't, can we use it in our resume? And so we built like a library of projects that way. And then we started sending those out to slightly bigger companies. And so our first projects, we were getting budgets of like $1,000 to $3,000. And then we could start targeting like $5,000 to $10,000 ones. Also, from Barrett and my connections from our band days, we connected with a lot of old musicians and people at record labels. And then we got a really good job doing a music video for Haji, one of the rappers in Odd Future. And that was also through a classmate at CalArts who was friends with him. But so it was just basically convincing people to trust us to do these projects. And then every one was a chance that we could kind of prove we can pull this off. And then like slowly leveling up. And I was working a lot as a freelance animator, and we had an opportunity. I got hired. So before we did Open the Portal, we were essentially just doing our own freelance jobs. And even everybody at Open the Portal now are all individual freelance animators that a lot of them have their own studios. Kongmin Kim, who we work with a lot, has Studio Zazak. Nick DeAgostino has Pox Films. Kike Rivera has Acho Studio. But so we all had our own thing, and I was working a lot as an animator on commercials and had the chance to work with Pez, who is just one of our all-time heroes in animation. We loved his films, and even just to get the chance to meet him was incredible. And then being able to work on a Pez project was a huge dream come true. So working on that was also we were able to start showing people like, hey, like we've made these commercials, and also like we've helped on these ones. Like I've animated on this commercial or that one. And one huge word of advice I would give to anyone out there who's an independent or freelance animator or has a studio, always be very, very careful about how you present your work. The commercials that I worked on with Pez, we presented sometimes like to clients along with the other work, like this is a commercial we worked on, and it ended up appearing, I think, that it felt like we were taking credit for doing the commercial. Some clients saw it that we were presenting it that way, which wasn't our intention, but it ended up, we really respect Pez, and I think going from that gray area of me animating personally to being a studio, we didn't present it the best way possible on our website. And I also, if Pez is out there listening or watching for any reason, dude, you're the man, and I want to personally apologize for anything that was ever misconstrued in our work that way. And we hope to work with him again one day. We just love Pez's work. But that having just that resume and people knowing like, okay, these guys they've created cool commercials, they've worked on cool commercials, they've a lot of our spec work, our music videos, all of those things, we were able to start finding clients that would trust us with slightly bigger things. And then people that we had worked with before, there's an amazing ad agency called Brand New School and production company. We had done a Barbie video with them where we just came on as the animation, like basically it was just me animating at first, and then we brought in a team to help them flesh it out. And once they started seeing our capabilities doing bigger and bigger projects, they started bringing us on to be the production house, like for this entire project. So we did a whole campaign with them where they were the directors, but they let like Open the Portal's job was to take the idea and assemble the entire team. And that was one of the projects I mentioned that this studio space wasn't even big enough for, and we ended up having to rent a place where we could get, I think we had like 15 stages going and a whole bunch of animators. So that was we hit the sweet spot with that about 1 or 2 years ago. And we found a really great sustainability with that. But that was also when we were realizing it takes so much energy to sustain this that we don't really have the time to develop our own IP. And that was also around the time we took Brain Fudge out a second time, because we're like, we want to pitch something, but we don't have a new idea. Like we don't have enough time to develop a new idea from scratch. So let's build on this pitch. So that experience, which was also, it was great, but it led us to really realize we need to pick one or the other. Either we need to focus on being a production house that executes projects for clients, or we need to be like a creative development studio. And from the beginning, that was always our goal, that we wanted to develop our own ideas. And so it was maybe around a year ago, we really started considering the shift, and it's only really taken hold this year. That I think we announced it officially about 2 months ago, but that like Open the Portal is now focused on creating our own stuff. One more note I wanted to make on when I was explaining kind of how we got to where we are with like the level of jobs increasing. We took some jobs that were very low paying, but it's very important that not to underbid yourself. That's like been a big problem in a lot of freelance work, is people bidding really low to get a job that like everyone knows good and well it's like that job's going to take $20,000, and then a bunch of people like, oh, I can do, if we do 5,000 we'll get our foot in the door. I wanted to be very clear that I'm not advocating for that. we were taking jobs that were coming to us like we have $1,000 or $2,000. But I think it's very important to value yourself well, and you'll get much more respect from your clients and anyone you work with if you really are just honest and upfront with how much time the animation is going to take and what it's going to cost. So that'd be a big encouragement I'd give to anybody that's doing freelance stuff. And I just wanted to make that distinction, that it's like it's definitely worth taking low paying jobs when you're getting started, and even at any time, but not charging less for a job that should be more. Definitely value yourself well. I highly recommend.
I was going to ask about that because I'm trying to figure out how to do some freelance for stop motion right now, because I don't really have a giant resume of stop motion either.
Sure.
That's what I'm looking at doing right now. So thanks. So right now, the state of Open the Portal is all of your resources are going towards pitching, correct? Right? And then once you get a pitch greenlit, then what happens?
When we get a pitch greenlit, so our vision, what we'd like to do is treat this place as the brain of the show, where we would basically what we did with the teaser we made, we would do on the level of the whole show. So we get our dream team together and a really tight team. We like to keep things very tight here, a very small core, but get our dream team together to develop the look and the mannerisms and like all the aesthetics of the show. I mentioned to you earlier before we were recording, if you look up online, the King of the Hill model sheet or show Bible, I think it's the model sheet, but one of the animators published it. It's this extensive document that shows like how Dale's cigarette hangs and like don't make Peggy too sexy and like all these guidelines, but they go into super detail, and that's what keeps the show the movement's so important, that the characters move the way they're supposed to. It's like if you watch Looney Tunes on mute, you can tell like the displacement activities of Bugs or Daffy or Wiley, like how nervous is this character, how confident is this character. And so we would that's the part we're really interested in working on. One thing that's different, we used to have a vision to be more like a Stupid Buddy or a Starburns, these big studios that they come up with the idea and they also are big production studios that execute the idea. Our interest is a lot more in that the specific kind of like brains behind the show, like, and behind the characters and kind of their psychology, figuring out how they're going to move and act, and not so much that like we want to produce everything in house, because it's interesting, it's amazing. I mean, I like having been I've had roles as an animator, a fabricator, a producer, all over the map, even post-production. It's all really fascinating, but it all takes a lot of energy. And we were finding that when in managing the big commercial projects, our skill set was spread so thin. And so we really, what would ideally happen if we got greenlit is we would focus here our energy on really stapling down like the psychological attributes of the characters, how they're going to move and act, how everything's going to look. And then we would probably work with a studio like a Starburns or someone that Screen Novelties would be another dream for us. They're some great friends and we love their work, but we work with another animation studio and do the production there.
So do you think you had to go through everything you kind of went through with the commercial work and the pitching, et cetera, to get back to this state? Or do you think you could have done this from the start?
We could have. There's no set path to this kind of thing. I do believe we could have done it from the start, but I think it would have been a much harder battle. I'm very grateful to have had the experience and the ups and downs of learning the ins and outs of the animation industry and how to do these productions through commercials rather than through our own work. Because I think we could have done it, but if we had gotten a show greenlit early on, we could have figured it out. But I think it would have been a pretty rough process. And I mean, I'm still anticipating that when we get a show, there's going to be so much to learn, but we are so much more comfortable now with the process as it relates to working with a team versus just when it was, 2 or 3 of us in an apartment. So I'm very grateful for the experience and I'm happy that it's gone that way. But I think it could have been possible the other way around. It just would have been a lot of work.
So going forward with this new kind of business model, or I guess what is the business model? Is it you sell a show and retain royalties, and that's how you sustain yourself for the next pitch, or what would it be like?
That would be the idea. Our hope is to pitch 2 to 3 shows a year, regardless of whether we have a show in production or not. We have a whole bank of ideas that we want to get out there, and we've timed out. We made like a loose plan based on how long this teaser took, and we're to say like what would it take to get, because even for this pitch we have more than we need, because this was such a passionate project for us. We have like all our characters in it. I would say you only need, and this is my opinion, but you only need a solid minute of animation to bring to a pitch. We did 3 minutes, because we just got out of control and we're having so much fun making this stuff. But we built a system where it's like, okay, what would it take to make 1 minute to put together a pitch package with a nice PDF, a presentation, some artwork, and enough to get the idea across in the room. And we figured out like a reasonable budget for that and a reasonable timeline. And so it's we basically between 4 and 6 months. And what our model is, like our hope is to get a show and then to be able to completely sustain that ourselves. If we don't have a show, we've met with a few different investors and people that are very interested in what Open the Portal does. And so we would probably cut individual deals with different investors to say, hey, we're going to take this idea out, and then work out some kind of percentage deal with them where they put up the money for us to spend the 4 months putting the pitch together. And it's kind of a staggered system where it's like, say, we do a pitch in the spring, we'll be pitching that in summer while we're developing the pitch for the fall. And so it's like there's, that's the vision for us, is to always have that kind of a rollout plan.
I love that. I feel like you have found kind of a sweet spot of working on your own work sustainably, because a lot of people that I talk to, whether they're working at a studio or somewhere else, they always have that idea that they want to work on in the back of their mind that they have put off for a very long time because they haven't been able to find the time. So I like that a lot, and your journey is pretty interesting. What is next for you personally? So you have this business, you're pitching. What's next for you? Like 10 years from now, where are you going to be at?
I'm like at the beginning, you read the description of our studio, which is kind of our new description we have, but that it's like we explore the dark side of imagination with a hopeful, positive outlook. That's kind of the core of all of the different ideas that I like to work with. And I'm, as much as stop motion is my favorite medium, we're really interested in experiential stuff. Like we've made parties where there's individual rooms you go into and you have like a kind of, it's almost like a DIY Disneyland, we call it, but you go through these experiences. We're really into that. I actually have a couple ideas for live action movies I'd love to shoot. I love traveling. I love LA. It's so nice living here, but I want to go all over the world. I'd love to shoot projects in other countries. And for me, I think 10 years from now, I hope to have enough consistency and Open the Portal here that I'm able to travel around and like maybe spend, a year in Europe doing a project, or go to Japan or something like that. So I'm really interested in exploring. And outside of all of this, I'm actually very interested in psychology lately for some reason. I don't know why. It's kind of fun that our show is called Psycho Psalm, so it has psychology built into it a little. But I don't know where the crossover is, but there's a degree. I'd like to find some way to connect the creative work with actual psychology, and kind of I'm really interested in things that psychology is learning about the way we think in our interior lives now. So I don't know what, but something with psychology.
Nice. I like it a lot. And that's a really ambitious dream to have, to travel the world and still film stuff. That's awesome. So maybe let's just wrap things up a little bit. One final question, do you have any final thoughts for someone perhaps who wants to pitch out of college or pitch from a studio or something like that?
I would, my biggest piece of advice would be, I'm trying to think of like the most positive way to say it. the sooner you can let go of your ego, the better. You'll make progress in leaps and bounds. If hold on to your passion as hard as you can, but don't be so precious and personal about it. And I'm saying that because that's how I was at the beginning, where it was like, I can't, this is going to be exactly the way it is. Listen to everybody. Like, talk. You'll learn so much more if you're open to feedback and critique, and if you can like consider that for a minute somebody might have a way better idea than you do, and that through making that shift, you'll also be much more fun to collaborate with. People will like working with you more. So I would say, and it's hard to tell sometimes for yourself how much of a weight that is on you. Only other people can tell you, but I would, show your stuff to people, let them critique it, and just listen. I used to always like, hey, can you critique this? And then someone would go, I don't really like that part. And I'd be like, well, here's why I did it. And then I'm defending it. And it's like, why did I even ask them to critique it then? It's like, listen, you don't have to agree, but let go of the ego, and then I think your true stuff can shine through in the best way possible.
Definitely. Yeah, that's good advice. There's a literary term called killing your darlings that
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you. Do you have anything else you want to share or anything at all?
I think I would end with an expansion on the kill your darlings. Let's see. Barrett, who is one of our co-owners and does all of our sound, he always uses this phrase: create like a child, edit like a scientist, detach like a warrior. And I think that sums it up. When you're creating, be as completely open, anything goes as possible. When you're editing, be completely methodical. And then when it's time to let go, kill your darlings.
I like that. I'm going to use that. That's great.
Cool, man.
Well, thank you so much, David. It's been a really great pleasure having you on the podcast, and great meeting you too.
You're welcome. Thank you, Terry. And for anyone out there who would like to see our short or teaser, we're not able to share it publicly, but Terry will give you the info. Send us an email, and we would love to share the private link with you.
Yeah, and if you're listening and you want to get in touch with David or see the teaser or follow him on Instagram or perhaps even buy his pitch that he gave in the description earlier, you can reach him at david@opentheportal.com. And Open the Portal is also their Instagram name. Or if you're interested in actually working with Open the Portal, or sometimes they take internships. If you're looking into that, you can reach them at hello@opentheportal.com. And that is all for now. Thank you for listening. Okay, bye.